I'm Marilyn Priel. Join us at the San Jose Fire Museum. It will be a blast.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
This is John McMillan. He's the president of the San Jose Fire Museum, and he's kindly agreed to come tell us about the history and the operations and about some of the most interesting things you could ever imagine. Hi, John.
Hello.
Let's start with the early history of the museum.
Okay, the San Jose Fire Department was organized on January 27th, 1854. And just last January, we celebrated our 157th birthday as an organized fire department. Some interesting aspects to our history. The city of San Jose was officially a city, designated a city by the state of California in 1850, and at that time it was the state capital of California. And in fact, in 1850, one of the first fire codes was passed because of the type of construction of housing back in that era. And then by 1854, once the city of San Jose had a common council and a mayor, it was finally decided to organize a fire department because they were having a lot of unusual fires back then, and they needed to do a better job of protection. You'll see in our collection today that we have quite a story that takes us back to 1810 to today, shows you all how firefighting has progressed over the last roughly 200 years. But San Jose has a wonderful history. On that day, January 27th, 1854, the Common Council of the City of San Jose organized the San Jose Fire Department and organized our first company. It was called San Jose Hook and Ladder No. 1. It was basically, in modern day terms, a truck company. They did not have hoses on it. They really went to the fire with a lot of axes and pike poles and buckets, and that's how they fought the fire back then. Those first 30 or so volunteers that were on that company, Hook and Ladder No. 1, are famous names in our history. The McKee name, the Reed name, it goes on and on. Many of them were volunteers that were bankers, were maybe a council member, a major farmer, and they wanted to be a volunteer firefighter, and later on their names were, the streets of San Jose took on their names. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very valuable, rich history.
So the original one then was wherever the truck was parked. That's where, I mean, they didn't have an actual fire department. Did they have a building? Or,
well, a gentleman by the name of Lightstone, he donated a very small piece of property in downtown San Jose. Remember, back then it was all orchards, developing and farming, so really San Jose was a very small element in the downtown. And so the city was able to get this small parcel and build a very simple building to house the first Hook and Ladder. In fact, the first Hook and Ladder was built locally. It wasn't manufactured by a major manufacturer. It was built here locally in the South Bay, and it was used many years as Hook and Ladder No. 1.
Tell me about this first big beautiful building. Is that the one then that we see all the pictures of the horses pulling the fire trucks out and everything, or the steamers? When was that actually built, that building? The
one that old fire station, the original old fire station one, at 35 Market Street was, it wasn't the very original fire station one, but in our memory, our history, it's the one that's most recognizable because before, we'll call it the original Fire Station 1, before it went into service, all these volunteer companies were kind of in their own unique stations. And then when this station was built right around 1890, when it went into service, it actually housed Empire Engine 1, Hook and Ladder number 1, and Chemical number 1. It was a 3-company station, the big station in downtown San Jose, the fast-growing downtown San Jose. And it was a very exciting time. City Hall was just a block away, and it was a beautiful building. But it was torn down in the 1950s when San Jose was growing. They opened up a new Fire Station 1.
A modern one.
A modern one after World War II, and shortly thereafter they tore down the old Station 1 to build a parking garage.
Oh my.
Yes.
How did this museum, when and how did this museum begin? The very beginnings of the San Jose Fire Museum. Okay,
the Fire Museum's original name was the San Jose Fire Muster Team. It was organized in the early 1970s. It was a wonderful time for our department's history because that's when a lot of this equipment started to show up and come together. Back in the 70s when we were the muster team, members of our department literally went out and competed throughout California in musters, where you would have steamers and hose carts doing competition competition not only with paid firefighters but volunteer firefighters. It was a big family get together, and it still happens today in our history. The San Jose Fire Department is not that involved anymore, but back in the 70s we were very involved. It slowed down for us, and then in around 2000, a group of us decided to take the San Jose muster team and become incorporated. And when it happened in 2002, we actually changed our name to the San Jose Fire Museum, got a 501c3 status, and that's where we're at today.
How did you acquire all this? How long have you been collecting it all, and where does it come from? How do you learn about something that's available for purchase? I guess you purchase it, or? We have many ways of acquiring or receiving what we have here in our museum today. Many of the pieces of equipment here are San Jose's own history. They were actually engines of trucks that fought fire and saved lives in San Jose. Some of them have come through the city donation process to us. Many of the apparatus here we have purchased from a farmer who had one out in his field, a local company who might have had an old steamer on display and decided to give it back to us. Some of our own firefighters have actually spent their money to go and buy very historical pieces of equipment and gift it to us. Many of our logbooks, our badges, our helmets, our ladders, a lot of these things have been donated or gifted to us from firefighters, or we've had individuals come here that have cleaned out their attic all of a sudden, and they found something in their attic, and they come to us and say, "Do you know what this is?" And we tell them, and it turns out it might be a historical logbook or historical pictures. This happens all the time. You were talking about being a ladder man and looking around and seeing some of these. The ladders are wooden, and I wouldn't really want to be climbing up a flaming building on a wooden ladder.
Well, in the early days, in the 1800s, I can't really tell you when it happened, but our department went to aluminum ladders in the 1900s, probably around, I'm going to say probably in the 1950s or 1960s. So today, the San Jose Fire Department has metal ladders. But I can tell you that the San Francisco Fire Department still uses wooden ladders. And it has a lot to do with conducting electricity. Wood doesn't, metal does. And, but we did transition to metal ladders in the 1900s.
I understand that you've asked your vice president of the board to join you and me part of the time on our tour. You're going to describe some of these items, tell me what they are, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, looking forward to that.
Okay, let's go do it.
Okay, let's go do it.
Jim Carter here is going to help us with our tour, And you were on the force for 25 years, the department?
35 years.
35 years.
Yes.
Wow. And you're 30 years.
30 years.
Okay. Well, this looks like we're standing by a big samovar. And what is it, and how did it work?
Well, actually, it's an 1890 Amoscag fire engine. It's actually a steam pumper. It's powered by steam, but heated by coal. And the firefighters kept the coal burning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They kept the fire going in the fire station, or the fire barn as they used to call it. And when they went to a fire, they started stoking the fire a little bit more to get the fire burning hotter, so that it would heat the steam, which is in the boiler, to provide the power to run the pump, which you see here, that big mechanism further on forward.
Which is this right here.
Right, this is the pumping mechanism. Now I won't go into all the intricacies of how it operated, but basically what it did was it produced pressure to power the water through the fire hoses.
Because there's so many gauges.
Right, exactly. And it's actually a boiler, really is what it is. And nowadays you'd actually have to have a certification to run the boiler. But back then, the firefighters were very talented, and most of them were able to run it pretty efficiently. And so by the time they got to a fire, they had a good head of steam, so to speak, built up and produced a lot of pressure in order to provide water pressure to put out the fire.
So this, it's a good old Franklin stove, I see.
That's it. Uh-huh.
And this is the coal bin down here?
Exactly. They used to keep bags of coal stored here in the event that they did have a fire. They would just start unloading the coal and stoke the fire, if you will, to get the boiler heated up to the proper temperature to produce the steam to pump the water pressure high enough to put out the fire. And they got their water from either ponds or streams or cauldrons or cisterns or wherever they could. I mean, water wasn't readily available out of the fire hydrants all the time, so they had to look for water and actually go find it.
Oh my goodness.
And many times they had to drag hoses great distances to get the water source.
This is so beautiful, and I'm wondering who keeps them so beautifully polished?
That would be our job.
Your job, your
is to take care of
volunteers,
them.
huh?
Yes.
And how many people does it take to keep all these gorgeous things shiny?
Well, not enough, unfortunately. We can always use more help. But however, there's probably 25 to 30 of us that are actively involved in keeping the equipment ready or keep it shined.
Is that nickel plating or on the silver?
Yes. And then it's also brass up at the top. Lots of polishing.
And
lots
there's
of
not
work.
a speck of dust anywhere.
Yes, and this is also was called Franklin engine number 3.
Well, as you just heard the discussion about the steam operation of a fire engine back in the 1800s, what's really unique about the San Jose Fire Museum collection is the steamer you were just looking at and this steamer right behind us. These were both working engines. The steamer on the right was Franklin Engine 3. It's an 1890 Amoscag, and the steamer behind me was Empire Engine 1, both working in downtown San Jose in the late 1800s, worked in the 1906 earthquake, and both were pulled by horses. But a major change in the fire service took place in the early 1900s, and what I want to show you today, besides these two wonderful steamers that were San Jose's, we also have what's called a Knox Martin tractor or tricycle, and there are, as we know today, only 2 of these in existence in the United States. We have the working one you see in front of you today. The other one is in the Smithsonian, and it does not work, and I think it was general purpose was a farm tractor. So we have a very unique piece of apparatus here as part of our collection. In 1914, when this was purchased and put in service, the horses went away, and we started to pull the steamers with these motorized tractors. This is just 2 very significant pieces of equipment. They're part of San Jose Fire Department's history and part of the museum collection that we want to share with the public.
Sam Seibert is a big instigator of this museum, and he's single-handedly, I believe, donated this.
No, I had a partner.
Oh, you did?
I had a partner, Joe Paradiso, Captain Paradiso. We bought it together and gave it to the museum.
Tell us what it is.
Well, it's a 1910, according to the records here, of a hand pumper that came out of Massachusetts, was located in the books by Chief Leonard Marks, and we were able to finance it and bring it out through the Mayflower outfit, which was Ron James, who at that time was mayor of the city of San Jose. And it came out of Warburton, Massachusetts is where it came from. And that and the hose reel is in back of it.
Tell us how it worked. You say hand pumper.
Well, there's a suction, what we call a squirrel tail, that drops into to a cistern, and then the men on each side would pump that, and then the hoses take off in the power there. This would pump about 90 feet, I think, in distance. So it would.
What are the buckets for? These
Well,
buckets?
in the days of yore, the story was throw the bucket out. Every family was required to have buckets, and their names were on the buckets. When the fire brigade went down the street, they yelled, and the people threw their buckets out, and the buckets were used to get the water and throw it on the fire. And everybody's bucket was with their name on it, so when the fire was all over, they were able to bring the buckets back to whoever they belonged to, and that was it. Of course, the buckets were simply very much like that. The other thing is most of the buckets were domed in the bottom, so they wouldn't stand up, only use them for one purpose, to carry the water and throw it on the fire.
Well, thank you for telling us about that and for donating this to our museum.
Thank you.
This is one of my favorites. It's all these wood ladders on this ladder truck, and this says horseless carriage.
This is recognized by the state of California. There's a lot of cars and trucks in California that have historical heritage, and this is one of them. It's an 85-foot American LaFrance tiller truck. There were two of them built, and in 1914 on Treasure Island for the Pan American Expo, they were both on display. After the exposition, one of them stayed with San Francisco. I don't know where the other one went, but this went from San Francisco Fire to Fresno Fire, and it finalized its history at the Salinas Fire Department, who surplused it, and I don't know the name of the gentleman, but there was an individual who purchased it from Salinas and then gave it to us around 1970. Out of the blue, he just wanted to give it to us. And so we've had it since 1970. We've had it in parades, and it worked in the 70s. And then in the 80s, it got dismantled and put into storage. And it's just been in the last 5 or 6 years that we're putting it back together.
Who does the restoration?
We have volunteers. You met Sam Seibert earlier. He has a group of individuals over at History San Jose in what's called the Trolley Barn, and that's where they do a lot of our restoration.
Okay.
We have vendors in the South Bay that, like the Cadillac, that restored the Cadillac for us. So we have a lot of outside vendors and volunteers. And then we have our own retired firefighters. They have a lot of skills. Mm-hmm. They will periodically come in and do some restoration and help us. So it's from all angles.
I saw your
support.
workshop back there.
We have a workshop that we're creating back there to encourage more of our retirees to come back and work on apparatus that they once worked on 40, 50 years ago over
well,
here.
let's walk around and look at this.
Okay.
It's so long. And
this is an 85-foot wood ladder tiller truck. And if you'll notice in the very back there is a large wheel. That's where the second tillerman would be back there and could assist in the steering. So this could make tight corners and turns. There was a quick release on this where this would pop up about 15 degrees, and then the firefighters would have to get up here and actually crank the aerial device up, and they'd have this pulley system because this thing is wood and 85 foot. There's a lot of weight here, so they would use that to raise it up to use for their firefighting attack.
it must be, what, 50 feet? Or?
The entire, I would say this is about a 55-foot apparatus, and the aerial ladder itself is probably a 2-section aerial that can extend to 85 feet once it's up in the air.
Okay. And then you've got, and then the firemen would stand here, I guess.
They could, these are running boards here. These were where we have the ladders, but this is where the shorter ladders would be located. And so these would be wooden ladders. We also have these
All
ladders
these
here.
extras,
This is a 50-foot ladder, wood ladder, that would also be used.
so they could go up more areas of a burning building.
Right, in
then, I
San
guess.
Francisco with the high rises, they needed
Need many.
a lot of different lengths of wood ladders. And
How many men would be on a thing like this?
Back then there was probably 5 or 6 people on this apparatus, and you had the driver, the captain, you had the tillerman, and you probably had at least 2 to 3 firefighters on the sides.
Doesn't seem like nearly enough.
But as you can see, we're little by little putting pieces back on it, and a lot of the pieces are laying back here and on the sides, but this is how you slowly bring a piece of equipment back together. This is a 1914, so in 2 years this will be 100 years old, and hopefully we're going to have this running in 2 years to celebrate its 100-year anniversary.
Oh, I hope so. That'd be nice. Okay, thanks.
The San Jose Fire Museum has a wonderful collection of apparatus. We have over 30 apparatus ranging from 2-wheeled hose carts up to modern quint apparatus that both handle the engine and truck jobs at a fire scene. We are proud to say that we have engine 1 that dates back to as early as 1899. We have trucks that date back to the middle of the 1800s. We have a history of apparatus that are unique to San Jose, and probably one of the largest unique collections in the United States. And as you come around this room, you'll see all the different styles of apparatus and the progression of firefighting in the history of America firefighting.
Even though this is nice, I never knew it existed. It's in an industrial area, it's in a warehouse, and it seems to me it's such an important part of San Jose's history. It should be downtown with all the other, like near the convention center, all the hotels where the tourists are coming in and so forth.
Absolutely.
And you all are trying to make this happen?
Yes, the San Jose Fire Museum, our mission is to preserve the history of the San Jose Fire Department and support the fire chief of the city of San Jose. But we have a goal also, and we've had the goal for the past 10 years, and that's to save Old Fire Station 1. And you had pointed earlier at this facade. This here is the original Fire Station 1 that was in existence at 35 Market Street. It was torn down when what we're going to call now Old Fire Station 1 went into service, which was right around 1951. And then in 2000, this station went out of service. And the new fire station, which is right down here, if you look, this is Market Street and St. James. We have a new Fire Station 1, which opened about 11 years ago. We have Old Fire Station 1, and they sit side by side. Again, this is Old Fire Station 1. And if you drive down Market Street, you'll see right between the two fire stations is the famous fire bell, which is also 150 years old. It was the bell that rang when the volunteers were get out of bed and come to your volunteer assignment as a firefighter. So this is our dream. When we talk about saving a fire engine or a badge or a helmet to preserve the city's history, well, a fire station is just as much a part of our city history as
like
any of our apparatus.
Like saving a fort or a mission.
Exactly. And this does have a landmark nomination. It is a significant piece of architecture built in the 1950s after World War II. We have a lot of community support that would like to see this building saved. And if someday we are able to set this up and use as a place to put our collection in, it would be a wonderful downtown fire museum, not only to support the people who are coming to the convention center, but there's already a history down there. The Fallon House, St. James Park, the courthouse. This is right in the walking tour of the city's history.
The walking tour.
And so, yes, that's our dream.
And then you have the dream to put a facade of this old one inside the...
In the back of Old 1, this would be many years in development, but with the right fundraising, what we'd like to do is in the backyard of Old Station 1, right now it's an asphalt backyard. We would like to basically build this original Fire Station 1 and build it in the back. What's wonderful about our dream is that we would have on a 1-acre site, we would have the 3 Fire Station 1s in the history of San Jose. That doesn't exist anywhere in our country. So we would have the current one, old one, and the original one all on one site with the fire bell. And yes, this is a rendering with an enclosed roof on the top, because our dream would be to have our 2 steamers. There's Franklin Engine 3, and there is the Knox Martin with Engine 1, and there's our 31 Mac, which was also Engine 1 and Engine 2. They would all be there on permanent display, and then in the front part of the museum, which is the actual old Fire Station 1, we would have a lot of these other apparatus, and it would be a living museum that would change. We would like to every year have a different era of apparatus on display, so it wouldn't get boring to people coming back to see the collection, especially young people. Children love fire engines. Children love fire trucks. And we want this to be a place for children to come to have fun, but learn fire safety, get some public safety education while they're there, and go home and be a little more careful around the house.
I hope it works out for you. I think it's an excellent idea.
Thank you very much.
I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you.
We're glad you joined us, and I know you're glad you joined us as well. But you really have to come down here in person and see this San Jose Fire Museum. We'll see you next time.